What is documentation? Okay. So we are not entirely sure of this. Let's just give a nice representation of us scratching our heads. And what are some of the forms of documentation that you would consider that you've come across in programming so far? Fields. Okay. I would generalize the fields. That's actually a very good answer. That's a remarkably good answer, because actually the generalization of that is actually code is documentation itself. Okay, so whether it's fields, methods, etc., even though it's written technically in Java, remember, we make choices of names and various other things. And sometimes the code itself, really good code, just describes what it does pretty perfectly. Okay, Linus says the comments. Of course, that's a classic one. Whenever you write a method, or you have part of your code is particularly complicated, it's quite nice to include a comment. Again, we sort of recognize them in Java, at least having the double slash. Okay. Any other forms of documentation that you have encountered? README, that's a great one. Okay. Yep. README documents. It can be pretty guaranteed if you're going to work with non-technical people that you would kind of wish they would actually read the information you have given them. Okay, the one from Oracle, I'm going to say that's like a tutorial. Yeah, absolutely, another perfectly valid form of documentation. I often use the Oracle tutorials, okay, and the Java docs as well, of course. The actual formal documentation. So let's say we just talked about the class libraries. It's worth saying that, okay, this is the Java version, we say class libraries, but every other programming language you meet will have some way of organizing and packaging code into modules, classes, whatever else. And it's kind of one of the great leaps forward in programming that we often miss out, that this actually makes our life much easier. What about Stack Overflow? Absolutely. It's quite possible that you don't actually know what you're looking for to begin with. Okay, maybe you don't actually know there's a starts with method and you're writing a question. Okay, I need to be able to detect if a string begins with these characters. And then someone will probably answer you and say, well, if you look in the string class and the starts with method, as I write in a strange curve there, that will actually give you this nice link to actually go and start looking in the class libraries. Often we don't know where to begin with documentation. Even just looking at this right now, you have a lot of different options. And actually it might be that starting out with a question on Google that takes you to Stack Overflow gives you enough domain information that then you can go and look at the more formal documentation, whether it's tutorials or the actual class libraries. One of the things we'll try to do with you is make sure that you understand how to write good comments in your code, know when to use comments and when to avoid using them, so that your code remains efficient in how it communicates what it does. I think one of the most kind of elegant forms of documentation is the code itself. And that can be quite a profound revelation, that you realize that if I write my code in such a good way that people wanting to use it, other developers, don't need to read that much of this kind of external documentation, okay? But this, what we would call an internal form of documentation, is actually really useful. Okay, great, nice.